is stopped by my hack that are getting close to being on time. So with that, let's call the meeting to order, and if you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, with the quorum present, I call the meeting to order. Roll call. Commissioner Aritz. Here. Commissioner Baki's here. Commissioner Evans. Here. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Timbo.
Present.
And Commissioner Gibbs.
Here.
Excellent. First off, I'd like to welcome, and please remember the board appreciates participation from the public. I haven't seen most of the public here, but thanks for always being here. If you have any comments throughout the meeting, please stand, state your name, address, and your comments will be heard. Thank you. So let's start off with a welcome and swearing in of our new commissioner. But before we do that, I'd like to make a couple of quick comments. At the city council meeting earlier, there were some concerns raised about the ability of Commissioner Gibbs to function as a member of the board independently from his association with AVMAX. So because of that, I've done some research talking to Councilwoman Moe as well as other commissioners and Mr. Gibbs and John. And I just want to do a quick overview of Commissioner Gibbs' position with AVMAX and a little bit of the City Council's history during the meeting and why they elected him, because there's some really good reasons, and Rich has a lot to bring to our board. So with that, most important, Rich, as a member of AVMAX, is the Director of Maintenance. He is not part of the management team over there, which will be negotiating contracts with us. So his position over there is specifically a maintenance function. And as well as Director of Maintenance, Rich is an FAA DAR, which is the airworthiness representative to the FAA. He's the one that certifies all the airplanes, and being a pilot, and those of us out here know that I appreciate the work that he does to ensure the airplanes we're flying, all the way from the small airplanes up to the main big airliners, have to be certified airworthy before they fly. And that's Rich's job, is to make sure that before they go off the line over to AVMAX, that they are certified and airworthy. So he's the one that has to write sign his signature, says yes, this is good. And because of that, Rich's job a lot of times as an FAA, he has to put his FAA hat on and take off his AVMAX employee hat and actually make the statement, say, hey guys, I'm sorry, you're gonna need to spend some more money because this airplane is not yet airworthy. So sometimes he goes head to head with the bosses for those reasons. So because of his in-depth FAA experience, he'll be a great representative and for us to know what's going on with the FAA. Third off, Rich has a long history at GTF. He used to own and operate Front Range Aviation down on the other end of the field for approximately 12 years, from '94 to 2006. So he knows how the FBO process works and has been there, done that, as we say in the business. So, and then lastly, a point that I think is worth calling is AVMAX, in its position as a heavy maintenance facility, it isn't directly in competition with Holman Aviation and or New Great Falls Jet Center on the other end. They've got a unique special operation that doesn't have a lot to do with any competition of local fuel and or maintenance stuff that goes on at the airport stuff. The stuff that they get comes from off the airport. So with that introduction, I think Rich should be good, but I would like to open it up to the floor if there's any concerns or comments from the floor. And I'd like to start off with Rich, if you'd like to say a couple of words to highlight that, and then we'll finish off with the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome, everybody, appreciate that. As I stated in the interview with the City Commission, I am here not as a representative of AVMAX, but rather a representative of the City of Great Falls. Right? First and foremost, that is who I am responsible to. As you had mentioned, in my business dealings with the FAA and internally with AVMAX, that I realize heavily on my integrity. Integrity means everything to me. So being able to recuse myself from a subject that I don't need to be involved in is just paramount. And I think I brought up a few of those situations firsthand. Just as an example, I thought about this, and other than AvMax, how would I be impacted? And my daughter has been here giving presentations. She's an architect with LPW, so automatically, you know, I'm gonna step back from that one. My son-in-law is an engineer with TD&H, who was out looking at lights the other day, so I'll step back from that one. So I do think that Great Falls and the county is small. And if we shrink that down to people who are willing to dedicate and devote their spare time to these type of boards, that number becomes even quite smaller. So I think we all, in one form or other, might possibly have some sort of a conflict, but it's just up to us to decide when we need to recuse ourselves. So.
Thank you for the comments. Any comments from the public? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, my name is Mary Sheehy-Moe. I'm a commissioner on the City Commission. We interviewed 4 candidates for the position for which we ultimately chose Rich. We had excellent candidates. We're fortunate to live in a community where community engagement is a value. Rich's many different angles on the aviation profession was what rose him to the top for all of us, I believe. And I think that we felt that level and different ways of looking at the business superseded any concerns about conflict of interest. We were particularly impressed by the fact that he himself also said, recognized that concern and the need to recuse himself. And anyone who puts their integrity right up there in front and says it's important to them is A-okay by me. So we think he's a great choice for the board.
Yes. I was just checking to see if any of you all voted.
I think you can call for a vote.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, so do any commissioners have any other concerns or items that we would like to be stated for the record before we see Commissioner Gibbs? No concerns. Fantastic.
I have one. It's not really a concern about Commissioner Gibbs, but I think my chief concern upon hearing about the appointment was more from a practical matter, understanding exactly how AvMax business or related concerns are affecting or will affect many areas of the airport. My only initial concern was that having to constantly assess potential conflicts could be detrimental to the smooth operations of our organization. I'm not quite sure if we know exactly how we're going to do that going forward, but certainly your experience screams that you are a good candidate for the commission.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
All right, well, I think even though it may not be required, I think it would be beneficial for all of us to just do a vote, and that way everybody knows that we're totally on board. So all in favor, or we need a motion?
Are you asking me for one?
Yeah.
Oh.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll be happy to make the motion to appoint Richard Gibbs.
And a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of bringing Commissioner Gibbs on, sitting on the board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The ayes have it unanimously. Welcome aboard. If you would like to come up front for the official swearing in.
That's nicer. I don't know.
Laura always tells us we have to get you on camera, so it's
Oh,
okay.
there you go, around the
You guys can go.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how it works. Come on right around to the front.
Should have let me leave.
No, we're gonna be wide enough that lens.
This is going to review.
That's right. Okay, sir, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Richard Gibbs,
Do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support, protect, and defend
that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and I will discharge the duties of my office
of Commissioner in and for the Great Falls International Airport Authority
as a commissioner in and for the Great Falls International Airport Authority
of Great Falls, Montana,
of Great Falls, Montana,
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go. One more thing before you go. Sign your name on the dotted line.
This was like joining the meeting.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. Time. Let's see. For you, sir. Now we got the hard work done. Okay, let's start off with the consent agenda. Oh, that's one more thing before that. It's with a lot of sympathy that if you haven't heard, I'd like to announce or just make a statement that we lost one of the pilots from the Montana Air National Guard in a C-130 accident in Australia. He was fighting fires. Ian Macbeth was a part-time guard pilot for the Montana Guard and a full-time. I actually soloed, his second soloed with his daughter at the flight school over at Holman Aviation in October. And she could only say wonderful things about her dad and how much she wanted to follow along his footsteps. So if we could, I'd like to have just a moment of silence for, in memory of Ian Macbeth before we carry on today's assignment. Thanks. Okay, now on to work we go. Oh, here. Yeah, I know, they changed
Oh,
them.
Oh,
Got it
okay,
figured.
all right, thank you.
Okay. Consent agenda. We'll start off with consent agenda. It's made up of routine, day-to-day items that require board action but not to appear to have significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion and vote by any board member. Consent agenda items today are approval of board meeting minutes from November of 2019, payroll checks totaling November $135,165.75, and for December, $101,371.75. Maintenance and operation checks November number 25059 through 25106 totaling $166,115.69, and December number is 25107- through 25174 totaling $377,574.86. D, approval passenger facility charge totaling in November $60,000 and in December $65,000. And finally, financial reports for November and December. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
So, question. Because
Absolutely.
I noticed there's significant variation between budget projections and actuals at this point in the year. So I assume you're using a linear model to sort of track that. And in organizations I've been in the past, they actually use their past averages, so you could get a better accurate whether your expenses and revenues are tracking the historical trend rather than a linear trend, which may not reflect reality. And I don't know, because if it's not going to reflect a linear trend really doesn't give you good information. Just an idea to consider.
Yeah, it is difficult, because, when we start the fiscal year in July, then of course it's the peak of the year, and, with all the additional summer flights, so you get ahead of yourself on revenue oftentimes. And then expenses, a lot of our expenses are during the snow season, when we add on extra temporary staff, or we're paying overtime, or we're using more fuel. The cutting blades that Rod uses and the broom blades that he uses on the equipment eat up our budget pretty quickly. So it's depending on the year. Now, last year, of course, well, even this year, we had pretty good weather throughout the first part of the winter, other than part of the fall where it snowed this year. So it's always difficult to know when you'll spend that money. I mean, even if we tried to reflect past patterns, if you get the snow in, like we had in February last year, you may think you're doing well up until February, and think we have extra money to spend. But generally speaking, we kind of go through those. Maria goes through them about every month and keeps in contact with Rod to make sure we're on budget. I think in the maybe the last 6 or 7 years, we've only had to come back to the board for a variance once or twice. We had a really heavy winter about 3-4 years ago, and we had to come back and ask for a variance. And then the other thing, we changed the policy where we used to budget for 4 or 5 major snow events a year, and we said, okay, what we'll do from now on is just budget for kind of 2 major snow events a year in the year, and if we have to overspend that, it's better not to have extra money in the budget and come back to the board and ask for a variance. And so we kind of adopted that policy. I bet that's been 8 or 9 years ago. We only had to use it once or twice. But as far as we can tell right now, we're on schedule on the expense side. We're probably a little bit ahead on the revenue side this year. And so that's, you know, we could try to meld it more to year over year. I mean, that might be a better indication.
What I've done in the past is you do a running 5 to 10 year average of the percent of budget at that point in time. And you use a linear model too, but you also have a column for a running 5 or 10 year average of the percent. Just an idea to consider. It might be interesting just to model it and see if it does any good or not.
Yeah, I'm sure Renee could take a look at that and just see if that, if
Something
there's
to
anything
consider.
that comes out of that.
You consider that.
Just something to consider.
And of course, too, remember our, the way our rates are set every year for the airlines, it's a needs-based budget, right? I mean, we add in all of the costs for the year, we deduct out the revenues that we project, and the revenues are fairly stable, but the airline rates vary wildly from year to year, you know, based on, if we have a major capital project, for example. So trend tracking that isn't really, on the revenue side, for landing fees and terminal rents, isn't gonna yield anything, because those rates fluctuate with the need for the year. So one year we might have a major runway renovation on 16, 17, and so we amortize that over 2 or 3 years, you know, but that could be $1 million, $2 million that we're amortizing over a couple of years there. So our rates will fluctuate up with that, and there's not a good way, and that'll come through on the revenue side, but, you know, it's not a trend you can analyze.
The longer period, those variations in terms of the percents, not the dollar values, should,
Yeah, some of that.
that
will wash.
noise should level off.
Sure, yeah, we could certainly take a look.
Just an idea.
Our budget hasn't really changed much, like from these almost 8 years that I've been here. It's even less than 2%, even between 1 and 2% in the last 8 years that I've been here. And we've always been under budget. It's really relative, it's depending on the usage and the seasonal items.
The revenue side has fluctuated up a lot more than the expense side, but yeah.
But we'll look into it.
I mean, when you were looking at dollar variances of over $1 million, it just, at this point in time of the year, it just says, okay, is that something, I know you're watching it, but as a board member, wondering if that's something you really should worry about or not, because there's not much information to say yes or no. So that's really, it's just a suggestion. Right now, we're trusting you.
And it'll start to show in there.
Right. By then, you're at a point where it's
Yeah.
hard to do anything about
Yeah,
it. That's the
can't change
challenge.
it. Excellent. Any other discussion on the consent agenda?
John, the big check to Delta, what's that in December, $275,000?
That was to United, right?
If discuss the grant, is the reimbursement.
Should be the United.
United.
That's the, so the,
Oh, excuse me, United.
yeah, the
Okay.
when we got that grant a few years ago, the FAA has rules in place that says we're not supposed to provide incentives to the.
Right.
The problem is, the chambers and all those organizations that ultimately hold the funds and disperse the funds are not federal vendors. So they're not set up in the payment systems for the federal government. And so after 2 years or so, I think that they finally got tired of trying to figure out how to get the chamber reimbursed every year, because the way that grant works is the community has to pay for the airline incentives and they get reimbursed out of the grant. So ultimately, they gave us a letter and said, okay, airport, you pay, because of course the chamber doesn't have, you know, $200,000 to front that kind of money to the airline to wait to be reimbursed. And so Maria worked with them, and they came back and said, okay, airport, you pay, and then we'll send the money to the chamber, and then you'll get reimbursed by the chamber. And so that's what we're doing. Did we do that last year, or was it just this year?
No, we've been doing it, but this is the third year, except that this time we changed the rule that we have to pay instead of the foundation.
Right, so this is the first time we've paid the airline directly. If that makes any sense, so.
It does. Once you introduce the topic, I'm familiar with the concept, yeah. Thanks.
Any further discussion?
In fact, we did get paid by the chamber
Yeah, we
Friday,
just got the money.
so, yeah, so we're back out of the hole on that one.
Yeah.
If there is no further discussion on the consent agenda, could I have a motion?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second. All right. With a motion and a second, I would like to move for a vote that we,
Seconded.
say again?
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to call for a vote on the consent agenda as previously stated. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay? Consent agenda. Okay, let's start off with the director's report.
Yes, lots to talk about. To start off with, we ended the year flat on boardings. We were down just a little less than 1%. Allegiant had fewer seats than the last year as they continue to kind of constrict their Vegas and Phoenix flying, while Alaska and United had increases in seats. So pretty much even Steven on the year. The upcoming year, looks like there might be lower on seats. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, the Delta is beginning to see the fruit of the 50-seat jet going away. We had heard this was a possibility as the E-gates closed in Salt Lake City. You may know the E-gates were restricted to 50-seat planes. Just the architecture of that concourse only allowed the 50-seater. Now that that's demoed, the gates that are remaining are remote pads and can accommodate any size plane. So Delta is beginning the process of transitioning out of those 50-seat jets rather rapidly now. And so what we're hearing from them is as they transition out of that 50-seater, which was primarily based in Salt Lake for them in the region, they're moving the 76-seat capacity out of Minneapolis to cover the 50-seat flights. And so many of the 76-seat jets are moving actually bases over to Salt Lake, and they're supposed to be being replaced with the new Airbuses, the 119-seat, I think, Airbuses that are being purchased. However, they're way behind on deliveries. So the Minneapolis hub is short on capacity for this summer. And as it sits right now, what Delta is indicating is we'll have a 76-seater in Minneapolis, but we won't have a second 76-seater, which we used to have. And the mainline capacity is completely full, and so we won't be able to get a mainline jet. The result will be a reduction in about 70 seats in that market over what we've had the last 2 years for the summertime, which is unfortunate, but it'll be temporary as they get those Airbuses in. The likely path would be that we would be assigned on a larger plane. And whether we get 1 or 2 flights in the summer will depend on how they see demand growth going forward. It could be that we don't see mainline traffic throughout the year, but in the summertime we might see a switch over to a mainline jet as a way to replace that capacity, or a second flight on that Airbus, on that newer Airbus. And so they're looking right now to see if they can replace that capacity in some way or another, either a second 76-seater. Their initial thought is they could probably replace the capacity through Salt Lake, but I'm not sure that'll be a one-for-one transition. I think a lot of people will opt for other options if they can't flow through Minneapolis. Salt Lake is not really a direct replacement for that eastbound flow. And so that schedule is very much in flux. It's a lot of what we've been talking about now for the last 10 years is as that 50-seat jet goes away, communities like us will see changes in our air service capacity. And I think this is kind of the first real indication of that. And the math going forward is we need to grow the traffic throughout the year so that there's an answer for us on a plane that allows us to maintain all of that service. And so looks like it could be a challenging year. We do know that Alaska's got some added capacity in the first quarter of the year as they've gone with a second flight, 4 days a week. We have that 7 p.m. departure, which is a new flight for us this year. I've been talking to them. It's popular the one direction, the other direction not so popular. I mean, obviously leaving Great Falls at 7 o'clock is appealing to you if you're trying to get home. For folks that are trying to start a flight out, local folks, it's not a great flight. And so what we're seeing is quite a bit of inbound usage of that flight, but on the outbound side, the usage is much lower. So ideally, as we rebank in the next year, we'll get some better flight times for that second flight. We've expressed we'd like to have the morning flight back. It makes sense to me to have that 8 a.m. and then a 1:30, which was the schedule that we had initially when they de-hubbed us from, or coupled us with Helena. So ideally, we'll get back to that schedule, and that'll be a better answer. In addition, you may remember United inadvertently canceled the first quarter flight. So now we have an odd double morning bank flight. So we have both a morning flight at 6:30, and then we have a second morning flight at 10. And that's a temporary situation for about another 3 weeks until we get into the next quarter schedule. That was, as we reported last fall. Go ahead.
I want to go back to Salt Lake. Are they going to keep the 50-seaters in Salt Lake?
No.
Because the last time I went through there, it was a hassle. You got to take the bus, there's no gate, you got to go out to the flight line.
Right.
Got to sit on the airplane for a half hour while they run the buses back and forth.
Yeah, that is
And then you
supposed.
don't like the 50-seaters to begin with, so people are not going to be picking Salt Lake
No.
anymore.
No, and that's,
It's too
and
much.
that's,
Well, that's just
hassle.
temporary with the
Yeah.
construction until they have all the new gates
It's
put
terrible.
in.
which is supposed to
Another
be
year.
summer. They're supposed to have new gates opening this summer, but we'll see. I mean, they've still got a lot of work to do.
I'm going to avoid Salt Lake until this summer.
And that's what makes it even worse is, it is difficult in Salt Lake right now. And so replacing that MSP capacity with Salt Lake is not gonna be popular with, I think, a lot of folks. And so, the one good thing we did here is Delta is looking at taking back the Salt Lake route as a Delta planned route. As we've mentioned in previous board meetings, they went to a per rata model about 2 years ago, where SkyWest actually controls that flight. Both the direct pricing between us and Salt Lake, now the beyond hub pricing Delta controls, but the turn pricing between us and Salt Lake is currently controlled by SkyWest along with the flight times. And we've had some hiccups in that transition as their planners have taken over that route. Odd flight times, early evening arrivals, so there's not a late night flight to connect through to get people back from the East Coast. Things like that, just some oddities, not to mention the pricing has been affected in that Salt Lake market some, I think, and we've continued to point that out to both Delta and SkyWest, that we have these anomalies from time to time. And so I know that there's some discussion about, whether or not in the future that would be a Delta planned route.
I was just looking at prices to Phoenix from here, and you would think with the Legion flight, we'd be very competitive. It was $150 cheaper per person out of Helena.
And
Just to go
that's,
to Phoenix.
yeah, and that's not uncommon depending, even on, even cheaper than Allegiant.
Well, Legion, you only get a choice, one choice a
Right.
week, and that
Yeah.
just doesn't work. I had to be
Yeah.
there at a certain day.
And it depends on the time of year, because oftentimes what you see in that Phoenix, or in that Helena market is they'll have inexpensive seats longer. Because like particularly on United, their United load factors are not that great. And so what you'll see is the way the airlines price the plane is there'll be so many tickets at this price, so many tickets at the next price. And as the lowest tickets sell, then the ladder continues to climb up. And so Great Falls right now, there isn't a lot of extra capacity, so we sell that plane, pretty well out by, a few weeks out from the flight time especially. And oftentimes, if you look 6 or 9 months out, that's a better indication of the, head-to-head pricing when all the tickets are available. I haven't looked at Phoenix specifically, us versus Helena, but in general, when you look at the average ticket price, we're still quite a bit less expensive than Helena. But it depends on the route and how long in advance you're looking too.
I was looking 2 months.
2 months and still, see, that's interesting. Is Delta only or did you look all carriers?
Using points, so
Yeah,
about 20,000.
I think what happens is you get closer to the actual date of departure. Great Falls flight is filled up so much, now they can start charging the premium prices for Great Falls, whereas Helena is still wide open. So they start selling for whatever they can to sell the seats. That's what I've seen in my experience.
well, in points, oftentimes Helena is much cheaper than us because of that, right from the get-go in points. I've noticed that too when I've tried to use points, is oftentimes they're one of the cheaper
We're gonna look
ones.
at cash too, just in case,
Yeah.
because it was a lot cheaper too.
That flight to Minneapolis, is it still gonna be like at 4 in the morning, at 5 in the morning?
5:40.
I think we have any six days.
5:40 in the morning.
That is painful.
Is it gonna stay that way?
Well, that depends on the bank time in Minneapolis. So I mean, if they reset the bank to leave at 8 AM or whatever time they've got that big East Coast bank, they'll plug that flight into that East Coast bank. You know, and so I mean, it gives you the best connections, you know, even though it's a very early flight. And of course, all those hub cities are busier and busier, and so they're trying to squeeze more banks in. Like last I knew, SeaTac was up to 9 banks a day to try and accommodate increased demand. So I mean, it does make for an early flight. But
Just
last year
remember, we're a
was
small
later,
fish
wasn't
in a big pond.
Really big.
It's always been close to 6.
it? Yeah, right around 6 AM.
Early bird gets the worm.
I think that changes seasonal though, because he's right, it's like a 5:40 departure this time of the year.
Yeah.
And then I think it goes to 6 or a little bit later when the summer months.
Yeah, they're probably adding in some de-icing time in the winter would be my guess, because they'll typically add like 20 minutes, isn't it? To the departure time to give you time to de-ice in the morning. That's probably the seasonal fluctuation.
The Delta flight that normally leaves late afternoon, early evening, is that a seasonal cancellation or is?
So that, this time of year, you're talking about the third Salt Lake?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5
But
o'clock.
typically, this time of year, we don't have it, but it's added in usually in March. So usually about the first week of March, sometimes even in February, they put that flight in. I was thinking last year it was really early. So that one will be picking up here in the next month or so. We'll be seeing that one adding back in. So yeah, typically they'll run that third flight all the way through Christmas, and then they'll bring it back. They'll take like a 6-week break, and then they'll bring it back. And then Denver's been doing that also recently. They've added the third one in, so we see kind of the same thing. I think that third one started last year, was it May, Vince, remember? I think it was last year, it started in May. So we're starting to see, you know, the third Denver flight kind of coming in also. And so I haven't looked at the schedule to see when that one starts this year.
And I think it's actually might be the first week of June, actually.
Oh, first we did, yeah.
And United, are they, excuse me, they're committed to the ERJ service to Denver, or is that just seasonal?
No,
To fill in.
Just to
yeah,
fill in?
exactly. Same type of thing, 50 seats are getting thinner, and so you know, they're filling that back in with 76 seaters. Yeah,
Trans-State's actually our primary provider between Denver and, for whatever reason, they were short. So SkyWest picked up the late and the early departure with the SkyWest ERJ 175. And that's just until the 13th of February. And then that goes away and Trans-State picks it up again.
and United appears to be more committed to the 50 seaters than the other carriers. I mean, obviously Alaska's done with them, and the other carriers, they seem like they're gonna have them longer, is kind of what I hear them saying, is they have a lot of markets they feel like they can serve out of Denver with that 50-seat jet, so.
And just from my experience with dealing with SkyWest on a regular basis, I don't see the 50-seater going away anytime soon. They're pushing it hard still.
It won't until they can figure out a replacement for it. They just can't build them fast enough, so they'll be here for a while.
Kind of related, I was reading an interesting article this morning about airline pricing and how it's going to be harder and harder for the consumers to score deals, if you will, because most of them now, I had to look it up because I couldn't think of the term, are using hyperdynamic pricing factors, where they're looking at news, global news, weather predictions, trending Google searches, social media posts, local events like concerts, when a rock or somebody is touring. And they said that domestic flight pricing on average now can change 17 times in a 2-day period.
Wow. In a 2-day period.
2-day period,
Wow.
yeah, so it's gonna be a struggle.
You're gonna have to have, like stock market, you're
Yeah,
gonna have to program them, watch the price.
Exactly,
Buy
yeah.
it when it hits a
right.
It was
target price.
quite an interesting article, actually. So,
Yeah, and those pricing models have long been very complicated. Even when you meet with the revenue folks at the airlines, oftentimes they don't know what's completely in that number. You know, if there's a market surcharge. I mean, I've, many times throughout my career as a consultant, and even since I've been here, you tell the airlines you're adding a surcharge on, and their first reaction is, no, we're not. And then when they drill down into the number, they realize they are. And, you know, and that is more often the case than not. Because they have kind of their base pricing, and then they add in regional factors like how far it is. long haul flights, they add in a fuel surcharge in some cases, and, and so when we get done with that, nobody really knows what's in the pudding. I mean, it's, so I'm happy to know they've added in additional factors.
Yes.
No one will be able to
Google
explain.
searches. social media.
Hyper-dynamic pricing.
Yes.
So what you're saying is we should go into some of these competing markets and Google the heck out of it just to try
Yes.
to drive the price.
There we go.
It's a good idea.
A new strategy for routes.
We need a bot.
All right, we digress.
Yes.
Sorry.
It was
Good
interesting.
questions.
On to the next subject, we received one response from our auditing RFP, and so we want to schedule an interview for that. I think traditionally, the last couple of times we've gotten one, I think we did get two some number of years ago, didn't we, Maria?
Yeah.
For government audits, not the hottest market. And so we'd like to schedule the members of the finance committee that are interested in sitting in on that selection panel to do that. In the past, we had one or two, Maria, do you know?
Actually, there were three at one point in time, but when we interviewed a couple of them, they were selected. But this time there's only one that replied and submitted the requirements.
But how about in terms of finance committee members, how many do we typically,
For finance committee, we have like,
on the interview panel?
No, he's asking how many of them
well,
panel.
it depends if you all want to attend, but we can have one or two.
I wasn't present the last
One or
time.
two would be plenty on that panel. So we can-
What's the purpose of that, when there's only one? Is it the predecessor auditor?
Yeah, it's the same, it's the same.
And that's what I told you when you put an ad in the paper.
We did.
You're not gonna get, it's only,
We
when
did.
we can't bid, there's only one other firm, that I thought.
So,
I mentioned that to you. And so if you had done it more by mailing out a couple others, I think you may have gotten a couple other back.
And we could certainly do that, I mean, if you think it's advisable.
Well, I mean, I guess if the price is pretty similar to prior years, they do a good job. I guess my point is, what are we gonna
Yeah,
interview?
would be a good
I'm
one.
gonna interview like what are they offering before they used to offer this and what else can they add on value? And other things that, like for instance, there are changes in the regulations and the other things that they could offer, other kind of services that they can offer other than what they are doing right now. It's because the audit world is also changing and the financial world is changing. And being a small airport, sometimes we don't have much access to what's going on outside, other than like when the regulating agencies tell us. So if there are some options, what else can they offer us other than what we're already getting? What is it, like what, so that we can have more value for the services other than just pure audit? And sometimes they do, they invited me to some of the webinars that are available later that free. So there are those things, because they're one of the auditors that are focused on airport audits, and that's actually how they got the business from us. Because we want somebody who's auditing airports so that they know what's happening with other airports as well.
I understand. My point is, if they're the only one that we have a proposal for, are we negotiating the price, or did they put in a proposal, right?
Yeah, they do.
With their offer, yeah. Was it similar to prior years?
No, they don't have the proposal yet, because before they have the proposal and they have the pricing already, but the thing is, that is subject to for us to accept or not accept during the interview. That's still subject to negotiation.
Traditionally, what we've done is, so we've had our first reading, and, we could just put the proposal in the next board packet and come back with the recommendation, but traditionally what we've done, the finance committee has made a recommendation of selection. If the board has, comfort level with that auditor and proposal, we don't necessarily have to interview them since we have one proposal, there's no requirement for that.
I mean, it's a known firm to the board, so I don't see what the interview would do.
Right.
Is the price comparable? I'm just looking, is it
Yes.
kind of a cost of living increase?
Yes, comparable.
That's what I was getting at.
So if it's the preference of the board, we'll just put that on the next
I
agenda.
prefer we just put it on there,
Okay.
because I mean, if it's a regulatory change, all of the firms have to follow it, that's not value added, that's a requirement. If they were to come to this meeting and say, we're not gonna offer you anything extra, well, then what are we gonna do? I mean,
Well, we
they
could
are
always
the-
rebid. and-
We could, yeah, unless you think there's a benefit to expanding outside of our method of,
I don't think so. It'd just be maybe next time to take that suggestion and mail, because as what you said, there's only a few firms that do airports that would be cost beneficial to come to Great Falls and spend that week here and do the on-site field work.
Yeah.
Those would be the three, I know there's three that you would mail those to, and then you probably get three back, and then you compare apples to apples. An ad in the paper is
Not
a
very
waste
helpful.
of
Is
money.
the price negotiable? I mean, is that something to
Yeah.
negotiate, or?
Oh, I haven't,
Since you only have
you know,
one.
this is part of the committee's action.
We have no leverage.
yeah, exactly.
No, but
Well, we could
they,
read
at
that.
this point, they don't even know that they're the only one that submitted. When we interview them, they don't know that.
If it's a fair price, it's fine.
They do a good job. That,
Yeah.
I would
When we
assume this is a
interview them,
fairly
They don't know
straightforward.
that they're the only ones that submitted anyway.
it is.
All right, so I think what I hear is, put the proposal in the next board packet, and we'll debate it there, and make a decision from there, and of course, the decision could be rebid, and that's still
Right.
available.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
All right. Just a note, I think Maria passed around a little trifold pamphlet. The State Aeronautical Conference is coming to Great Falls for the first time in, I think it's well over a decade. And they'll be in town in February, I think the day or
57.
several days after our next board meeting. And so it's a great opportunity to come and see some of the topics that be presented here. That, as I said, we don't normally host this. We haven't in a long time. So the opportunity to come in and see some of these speakers, I think is really terrific. A few years ago, we were trying to find some opportunities to get the board to some of these aviation conferences, and having one come to our backyard is a great opportunity to do that. So want to get you that brochure. There's also a MAMA meeting, which is Montana Airport Managers Meeting, or Association meeting, following that meeting. And so there's some meeting times will be announced for that also, with some curriculum too, if you're interested in going to those. And so we invite you to come and take part in this. I think it's a great opportunity to meet some of the other airport people in the state that are work around the state in the big and small and medium-sized airports, and hear some of the latest things going on in our industry. The airline conference, which is the other major aviation conference we're hosting this year, is in September. This is the state airport operators and the like. But they are bringing in some federal folks from headquarters, the FAA side. I think Dave Sumi from the Western region is going to be here. And I've known Dave since my time at SeaTac, and get an opportunity to hear what's on the FAA's mind is always helpful. And so we'd love to sign any of you up that are interested. And Maria is actually organizing that conference for us. So if you are interested in going, just drop Alyssa an email, and we'll get you registered and make sure you're there for the event. But good opportunity.
Is that for the February one or the September?
For February and September, we haven't set the agenda yet. We're still working on the formal agenda, but there will definitely be some opportunities there. The September conference it's not a what I would call a seminar. It's more of a route planning meeting, and so there isn't a curriculum. We're not trying to teach anybody anything in that conference. That conference is purely airline route oriented, and so the first couple days of that conference, depending on when the airlines come in, will just be some familiarization tours of the community, and then on Wednesday here in the upstairs boardroom, we'll have what's called the speed dating meetings, where each airport will get 30 minutes with each of the airlines that come in, present their route analysis, discuss routes, how they're performing, discuss new routes, and those types of things. So the front end of that conference is all social, and that's where we'll probably try to plug the board in. We're gonna have some socials in the evening, most likely at Empty Pikes, which is the front down there, because they're staying at the hotel across the parking lot there. And so there'll be some opportunities there. We're gonna have an evening reception, I think at 3660 elevation, which will be our community presentations, where we can invite community leaders like Great Falls Tourism to talk about the community, that type of thing. And so we'll hopefully draw upon you to staff some of those with us, just to get a chance to talk to the airlines informally, answer any questions they have about the community, that type of thing. It's a great event. Getting this kind of visibility for Great Falls is something I've been working on for about 10 years, to try and get a conference here. And this new format of the Montana Rendezvous gives us the perfect opportunity to do that. So very excited, and we'll have probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 airlines here in Great Falls, which is terrific. I mean, very few communities our size get that opportunity. So
Would this be held at?
that is held at the Heritage.
So it's gonna be the
I'd like to comment, my son is a speaker.
I was gonna bring that up for you.
Doesn't run for me.
Are you gonna go to that one or no?
Yeah, I got free tickets. I'd like to
Expected
register.
to have about
Yeah.
500 attendees.
I'd like to register.
So is this an
There is a
all-day
registration
thing, or, I mean, there's no
What was that?
times?
Yeah, it's actually
There's a
several days.
website to register on the flyer.
Something's never changed.
Hey Maria, can you email them the detailed itinerary?
It's still a
It's
draft.
not there apparently. I went online, it's not there.
Yeah, they're kind of late in getting the full itinerary done this
I
year.
think by next week they
Go
will
to
have the draft,
Montana.
the final.
Is every year.
Yeah, Maria's on the committee, so she's working with those guys, but yeah, it seems like their times are a little fluid yet.
I mean, is it a come and go where you can come and
Yes.
go?
Yeah.
Several different sessions.
Should we register ourselves, or should the airport register?
We'll get a list of the registry, yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
We register everybody who would like, we just have to know who's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
But I mean, that's what, I guess that's what I'm trying to
A
understand.
community standpoint, I'm just curious as how they got it back to Great
What,
Falls.
this one? Actually, the Heritage took the lead.
Oh, okay.
You know, we don't have, this one's a fairly big one, and there aren't many places that can hold it. I think Heritage is about the only one right now. You know, we had mentioned we would like to get it. Gosh, I thought it was 3 years ago. We said, hey, we'd like to kind of get our foot in the door if we could find a hotel that would do it, and the Heritage jumped in and took the lead and got it. At the time, we thought we would have the Hilton also, which, you know, they were gonna expand, and so, you know, that obviously didn't come to be. So right now, there's only one place in town. In the last time we had it, we actually had some of the bigger events up here, in our big rooms, but the conference doesn't want to do that anymore. They really want everything at one property, which really limits us in terms of the facilities that can host that, because it is, I forget, do you remember how many hundreds of people come to this?
Last year, normally it's about between 400 to 500 people.
And so that limits us on properties that can handle that kind of exhibition space.
Could we maybe, when we get the details, I mean, there must be pricing involved here too. I wouldn't want you to waste a whole registration, including lunches and dinners, if I'm only coming to one thing. So can you provide?
Yeah, we can do that
It
too.
will include the daily activities and the classes and all the subjects, everything that's happening on a 3-day.
Right, but
So
is
you
there,
could-
I'm asking, is there individual pricing if you're not coming to the whole?
Like a
Yes,
golf
yeah.
cart.
That's what,
Especially
yeah.
for meals,
So I don't want you to register me until I know,
yeah.
Yeah, I think what we can probably talk to them too, and just say, hey, if we have some board members that wanna come and, you know, and they're not gonna eat the meals, and they just wanna audit some of these, can we work something out for a lesser amount? I mean, because we are sponsoring some of the stuff, it'd be nice if we could get some comps, a few comps.
Keynotes are dinners though.
yeah,
Yeah.
lip or lunches,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, looks good.
All right.
The other thing I was gonna note is the incentive fund remains at about 80%. We're trying to pull together enough dollars to go after that next SCASD grant. We've exhausted a lot of the fundraising potential that we had kind of the list we first come up with down at the chamber. And we're hoping to still find a couple more donors. Shane had a few ideas of businesses he hoped to call on here in the next couple of months to round out that last 20% of incentive dollars. I just talked to our air service consultant last week, the week before, and the FAA is, or DOT is indicating there'll be a small community air service development grant cycle this spring. Traditionally, the applications come out in the April-May timeframe, and proposals are due in June, and then there's a decision by September. For the last 3 or 4 years, that cycle's been all topsy-turvy. Last I knew, even last month, the winner of last year's SCASD had not been announced, and so we're hoping and they keep indicating they're going to get back to a normal, normal cycle. But ideally, we'll have our community funds in place. We'll write that grant sometime in the June timeframe. We would find out this fall about the timing of the airline conference, that we have SCASD dollars to go after a new route, and then we would be pursuing some of those route discussions even at our event in September. And so that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping that timeline stays intact. We should know more as we get closer to that May-June timeframe of when those applications are due to come out. In the interim, we've got some more fundraising to do. If you know of local businesses that benefit from travel but are not in the pool, encourage them to get in touch with the chamber to see if they would be interested in making donations. As I've told many folks locally, I mean, it's not necessarily the size of the donation. And the airlines, I know in particular, last time around when we talked to Frontier, we had, I think, 60 total donors between companies and individuals. And that was the first thing they noticed was your pool is really broad, which is good. I mean, what they don't like to see is, hey, the Economic Development Corporation wrote a check for $300,000, and that's the only donor. And so when they see local businesses that travel involved, that's a positive thing for them. And so still trying to identify some more companies to get that gap closed on our fundraising. But ideally, we'll have a SCASD out this spring. Whatever we have at that point, we'll write the grant for it and see what we can get.
So just to finish up on that, 80% of what's our target goal?
What our target?
How much do we, when we say 20%, how many dollars do we actually, are we shooting for?
We try
Do
not
we
to
need
talk
an
about
extra
the-
20 grand, or we need 250,000?
Closer to the second one. We try not to talk about the funding pool, only because
Right.
we don't want to target on what our SCASD grant. These are competitive grants, so we don't want to have a target on how much of our grant we're going to ask and what we have to match it.
Obviously, the more you have, the better you can.
Exactly. The more, and generally it used to be you could match at 40 and get 60. That's the last grant we wrote. We actually got like 64% match, which was really good. More recently, Bozeman recently wrote one where they gave 60%, only got 40. So the pool is getting more competitive because more airports are getting into that pool. We don't know how this cycle will match up. Our consultant usually can get kind of the feel for who all is going to apply and kind of give us an idea of what the range should be. And they've been pretty accurate the last couple of times. When we've written SCASD grants, we've been competitive on those. So. And this is the first one we are allowed to write, because you can only write one every 3 years and you can only have one outstanding grant. And we just closed out the Chicago grant after 3 years. So this is the first time we can actually write a SCASD in some time.
So just to follow through with that, United is coming back with direct flights this summer through Chicago without a SCASD, without any incentives, correct?
We're still working on that one some. The route took a little bit of a step back. Last year they based it out of Great Falls instead of basing it out of Chicago. And the reason they did that, Laura and I went to see United before Christmas. They were hoping to drum up more local demand on that route because traditionally it had been 85 to 89% inbound, which is good in a sense because we're bringing tourists into the region, right? There's 6,000 additional seats times 0.89 is a lot of additional tourists coming into the area over the course of the summer. But it didn't do quite as well as they'd hoped. And so they were asking this year if we could find some guarantee funds. We're kind of working on that with the chamber to see what we might have, if we could issue some type of small guarantee. We also have the ability through the incentive program that the board approved and has adjusted from time to time the last few years. We also have the ability to comp the fees on that route, which we have not used, and I have offered that to United that we would comp fees this next year to try and improve the financials on that route. Now, at the same time, we've also pointed out that that route's going back to a Chicago start, which is a stronger route for them. And in addition, if there is a reduction in the number of MSP seats, this flight's likely to see quite a bit more demand eastbound switching over to United because they'll have first-class seating and also a nice competing flight for that because it will be an 11, which is about the slot of the old 130 NSP that we had when we used to have 2 flights instead of one big main one. So there's good news for that route if they hang in there. My hope is they'll hang in there, but of course they're squeezed on frames like everyone is, and so that flight's a little still in flux, but we're hopeful we can get it nailed down here in the next month or so. And it is being already sold, so at the same time, if you know someone planning travel this summer, it's a great time to book a flight through Chicago, because if that flight ends up sold out for the month of June, I'm pretty confident they'll nail that thing down. So yeah.
Gotcha, perfect, thank you.
Sure. The other thing I was going to mention is this Friday we're hosting movie night up here at the terminal at 6 p.m. This time of year we don't have that many evening flights. It leaves the terminal open. It's the second time we've attempted this. Laura has contracted with one of the outdoor movie companies. They'll put up a big inflatable screen over by the grizzly bear, and we've invited the community to come up and watch someone with the pig, Babe. So we'll be showing Babe here in the terminal building. There'll be concessions open. There'll be cheap hot dogs, cheap popcorn. Just an opportunity to get people in up here in the wintertime to do something on a Friday night. Last time I think we had probably in the neighborhood of 200-300 people show up. It was well attended, so we're looking forward to do that again. We like the idea of getting the community up here now and then just to experience the airport even if they don't fly. Be a good community partner in the months when the parks aren't available for these flights. Gives folks things to do. Subsequent to us naming our movie night, 2 other new movie nights have been named that week. One's at the Peak, and then one's at the Salvation Army. So, but nonetheless, we're hopeful that we'll get some folks up here. We'll have some signage up, just our usual. Have you seen these fairs type signage? We'll also be passing out brochures about the incentive program, trying to encourage folks to get involved with low air service costs in our region. We'll be passing those out on behalf of the chamber. Tell people about that program too. So Friday night, come on up and check out the Babe.
Are we doing any radio or newspaper advertising, or?
We did mostly Facebook. So we did some boosted posts on Facebook, but then I was also on the community calendar. Was that Friday? Thursday or Friday, the KFBB had me come over and do community calendar to talk about the movie night, so we did that also. So yeah, I've seen a lot of people that have posted around the Facebook posting, so it is out there. So, and then lastly, Saturday evening, or I should say afternoon and evening, there's an open house for Oakwells in the terminal here. They're introducing their new rooms they've remodeled upstairs. I thought once we get done today with the meeting, if anybody would like to go up and check those out, the rooms they're spectacular. It's really amazing what they've done up there, and pretty exciting that they're going after meeting business again, trying to really get aggressive in terms of that wedding part of the business and event planners. And so this weekend they're hosting that open house. They've got some hors d'oeuvres and that type of thing that they're offering upstairs for people to come up and check out their new spaces. I think that's it. Did I miss anything? Oh, I guess the only other thing I'd mention is we had some damage in the farther west of the 2 stairwells in the front of the building. There's an air vent over there that somehow during some of those windy, wet events we had, water blew up into the vent and blew out the ceiling in the stairwell. So we had some drywall fall out of that stairwell, and Rod's working on getting a crew in there to repair that and see what we can do to try to alleviate that water situation. I don't know that it's ever happened before, Rod.
No, that's never.
So we must have had just some unique situations of wind and water to get those up in there, but we did have some damage there. Unfortunately, it's so high up in the air, some 20 feet or so, we don't have any.
About it.
Yeah.
To the ceiling in the stairwell. So.
We don't have anything we can get up there with because we can't get the lift into the stairwell. So we're going to have to use some of
build scaffolding.
bunch of scaffolding up there.
In there,
so yeah. But the last couple of years, for whatever reason, damaging weather every year has gotten some terminal repairs. It's pretty unusual, but up until then, we hadn't had those problems, but now we're getting them, so.
All right, comments on director's report? All right, capital project update.
Yes, capital projects right now, we're in the process of planning the 2020 program. You'll see on the agenda, we've already put on there a couple of updates to those programs. All of the construction on our 2019 program is now complete. We're done, finally. There's a little bit of work still to be done in the springtime on some reseeding over towards some reseeding over in the,
They finished all of those seeding.
oh, they did get the seeding,
project.
yeah,
Yep,
okay,
they did that a few months ago.
Yeah, so we're pretty much locked up on 2019 and working now on design of 2020. Rod and Chris and I did a driving tour on Friday of some of the intersections, looking for additional items we need to do in that scope of work for the roadway this summer. Roads look pretty good. There's not a whole lot of subsurface problems that I see. Looks like we'll be mainly a straight mill and fill. We're gonna do some lane realignments to try and straighten out some of these weird corners. The Holman intersection needs some work to try and straighten that out, so it's more of a standard, closer to a standard T than what we have today. We need to change the right-of-ways on that road to be more natural with the flow of traffic. We're also gonna do a little bit of lane modification right out here by the terminal. There's kind of that, the road kind of comes to an hourglass at the Bear there, and we're gonna widen that a little bit so it's more of a straight shot, so you can have a left turn into the building and still allow people to flow straight on back to the FedEx building and to AvMax and those. We'll also be completing the little stub road down at the southwest end of the airfield there. You may remember several years ago, we built a test strip, which is the road that will provide access to the hangar pads down there next to the Eagle Jet hangar. We're gonna complete that road with this project. We'll tie into it. We left about 100 feet or so from attaching the road because we need to bridge a drain in there and a couple other things. This project will complete that. And then we'll mill and fill the Front Range Road also. As you can imagine, with all the water line construction over the last couple of years, we've cut that one up pretty good. It's due for some mill and fill. The project will pick up right kind of out here at the corner and head back to FedEx. And so I think we've got pretty much everything worked out as to what needs to get done, and CHU and Hill's working on the design of that. It'll bid, we're hearing, we'll receive a grant as early as March this year, April, it sounds like at the latest. And that's really great. You may be familiar, that's the old timeline. Years past, you used to get your grants early. Because of the continuing budget situation we've had for over a decade now, we've been getting grants as late as August, sometimes even September, and it really becomes hard to get work done. So exciting, we might actually bid this and get the work started this spring, which we haven't done in I can't think how long, so good news there.
Hopefully. While we're still in construction season, it's not snowing. That'll be good.
And that's all I've got on the capital project report.
Okay, next up, election of officers. I'm actually sitting in this position as the vice chairman from 2019. So we need to elect the chairman for the 2020 term as well as a new vice chairman. So we are looking for nominations and seconds for chairman and vice chairman positions, and any discussion.
I would like to nominate Vince Waukee for chair of the board. I'd like to nominate Deborah Evans as vice chair.
I was gonna second the nomination of Vince, I don't know what to
I
call
guess-
it. Seconding
I guess
myself.
I could do it as one motion, or probably
We'll
should
take
do
it as two motions, how about that?
Yeah.
We'll go with the nomination for
I will
chairman
nominate
for.
Vince Waukee
And
first.
I'll second
Is there- all
that.
right. So we have a second, a nomination and a second, any discussion? Public comment? All right, with a nomination and a second, you guys really, really want me to keep talking? All right, let's call for a vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? I guess I don't have to move my
You
seat.
don't have to.
All right, now we'll take
No.
your nomination
I'd
for
like to
Deb,
nominate
and
Deborah Evans as vice chair.
I will second that nomination as well. Any comments, discussion? Comment? All right, we have a nomination and a second for Deb as vice chairman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we don't have to move any seats.
Yes.
Is that quick enough, Warren?
That was great.
All right, back to work we go.
So it's like,
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the vote of confidence.
so for the vice chair, it was,
Commissioner Aaron's,
I read.
And then I second.
Motion and you second. Thank you.
all right. Okay, to the Oakwell's proposal.
Yes, as you know, the last year almost now, we've been working with Oakwells on some of the renovations they wanted to make to the space. In selecting Oakwells, we knew that, and several of the other candidates did too, we knew that they would want to make changes to the space and that likely we would have some involvement in those changes. Getting them in first and figuring out what they wanted to do to change the space was, I think, an important part of it as they got in and tried to figure out what was going to be helpful to them. Obviously, when you see the space upstairs, you'll see they've spent quite a bit of money on the facilities already, in an effort to try and make those more marketable. They've replaced a lot of the furniture upstairs, the fixtures upstairs, painted, fixed, the ceiling that was really chewed up after many years of use. Put in new flooring. I some days didn't know if we would ever carpet that area, it's so massive again. But they've made that investment on their own, really, and they've come back to us and asked if we would share in that cost one way or another. We've had several rounds of negotiations. I think Laura and I have been back and forth on this 3 or 4 times with them, trying to nail this down a little more. Based on the investment they've made so far, which is primarily, and we should tour those afterwards, the upstairs and then the restaurant out here in front, what we've come to is we'd like to recommend to the board that we go ahead and purchase new furniture for the restaurant out there for the cost of $15,000, and we extend their contract in recognition of their investment for 5 years. The tables and chairs that are out there were not replaced on purpose during the last remodel in 2014. We felt that we would wait until this contract was rebid in order to reinvest in those. They're not in terrible shape. I mean, certainly we could pass on that furniture for some time in the future. The chairs are upholstered and they are starting to rip. You find some ripped ones out there. I was just out looking at them the other day. Most of the tables are in decent shape, but they're an older style. And given the investment they've made out there, we think it's a reasonable request. Just by comparison, we bought all the furniture for the new restaurant, the Rockies Inside Security, when we did the remodel back in 2014. The airport purchased that. We own that furniture. Should Oakwells move or sell the company or whatever, we will own this furniture also down here on this level. We purposely told them we didn't want to own the furniture upstairs because should Oakwells stop operating, I'm not sure how well we could replace that banquet function. Not every operator of an airport concession would want to run that. So we told them right up front, we didn't think we would invest in the upstairs because that's kind of an at-risk investment. It's not our normal clientele, it's not airport patrons, it's something other than that. And so that's why you see the steel structure the way it is. We felt we should invest in the areas of the airport that our passengers use and let that be what it may upstairs. If they can turn a profit and renovate those and make it a profitable entity for them, we share in the revenue of that, but we didn't want to be on the hook for the liability of it. And so I really think this is a good compromise of $15,000 to purchase that furniture and then 5-year extension in recognition of their investment.
So John, I'm sorry, I thought I understood that. Did you say the airport does own the furniture in the, okay,
Yes, in the 14 remodel, we bought all the furniture on the other side.
but even the,
Oh, the upstairs furniture, no.
well, that's not what it says.
Well, I think we'll end up owning it at the end
Oh,
of
okay.
the contract, but right now they own the furniture. So they've paid $325,000, and at the end of the contract, that furniture will come to us. But right now, it's their investment, not ours.
Okay, because it says we purchased the tables and chairs and own them, and the same was done with the banquet rooms. That's
I
why,
think that the initial banquet room furniture was purchased by us, isn't that right, Rod?
that's why I'm confused.
We didn't buy the furniture that's up there now.
Not the newly remodeled furniture,
Yeah,
the original.
the original furniture was likely ours, because, Rod, that was.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, I think that's correct, is, the furniture, when that space was built, was 2008 or 6, I forget the date,
2003-ish.
2003. Then I think at that point, that was part of the capital project to purchase that, but the stuff that Oakwells has since purchased now, we did not buy.
Okay, I think maybe I'm just reading it differently. Okay.
Okay. Well, that was completed on the secure side.
It's the first couple sentences in the discussion.
Gotcha.
I think, yeah, I think what
Yeah.
Laura's saying there is when the banquet rooms were built,
Right, yeah,
we purchased that equipment, and that equipment has since been
Right.
replaced.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, all we own is the secure side restaurant and the floor restaurant outside of secure.
Yeah, we own this furniture now, and yeah, we.
And that's what we're talking about right now.
Yes, yeah, Hopewells would like us to replace that.
Basically, that one and our next one that we're gonna look at down the road here is doing an upgrade of the furniture and the ceiling fixture to make the outside of security restaurant a good draw.
Yeah, the new furniture that they wanna buy is like a barnwood table with a darker wood chair that matches what they've already done in the bar area. So they're hoping that we would agree to, to purchase that equipment so that they basically, in effect, it renovate the entire area. And, I think that's a reasonable request. That is a very visible part of our building, as opposed to the meeting rooms where the public doesn't really see those unless they're there for an event. And like I said, during the negotiations, and even really during the interview, they asked those questions, and at the time, we told them, I'm not sure we would be interested in investing upstairs. It just, to me, that needs to be, if you can make a profit at it, then you should invest in it. Certainly we share in that, the revenue contract, you get a percentage of both food and beverage. But given that expansion of the building costs several $1 million and will not likely never recover that full cost, I don't want to go further in the red on the upstairs.
Right. And part of the discussion is also extending the Oakwell's contract. Are we currently at 5 years?
No, we're currently 15. So, yeah, we would extend this to a 20-year contract.
So they want to make a long-term commitment to this as well.
Well, right, they're hoping that, in recognition for the $300,000 that they've spent, that we would continue that partnership. And we used that model with Air Host too. I think they were here a total of 35 years. Their initial contract was a really long contract, a 20-year contract, and then we did some extensions, including an extension when they built the kitchen on the other side of the security over there. We did an extension of the contract that paid for that also, and so that's what they're asking for here is a similar extension for their investment.
It's a very common practice in higher ed too, to get some money to remodel cafeterias on campus too, extending contracts.
Sure.
They want
If
to
you're gonna spend the money, you want the commitment to get it back.
And that was, usually you don't have the money to do the numbers, so it's a way to get it done.
Well, and this is part of the reason that we started with a 15-year contract, is we wanted the ability to do some extending in order to recoup some of this investment, because we knew we didn't want to pay for the full cost out of the airport coffers.
All right, do I have a motion to approve spending up to $15,000 for purchase of tables and chairs for the landside seating area, and extending Oakwell's contract for up to 5 years?
Can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
So just to be clear then, going forward, because you commented, they are analyzing other deficiencies. Are we anticipating we'll be asked to cost share and some other?
I think we'll probably have changes to the secure side. Also, that's the one area they haven't really developed their full plan for. They're still evaluating how that area works. We've talked in the past about a separate coffee kiosk to provide a second point of sale. Laura, I talked to him last week. I mentioned the idea of some self-serve kiosks, which are becoming ever more popular, even at McDonald's now, where you make your own selections, and then that person that would normally take your order can get the food. So we're talking about some technology, because their new system can do that. The new Clover system, which was part of their initial investment, can do that. And so, we're looking at options for that, and I do believe they'll probably come back and say, okay, here's our plan for the secure area, we would like, this and that also. And so I think, yes, we told them, and certainly we could table this. What I told Laura is, I think, we've kind of got the pre-security side figured out. I'm willing to go back once we've got the secure side figured out what we both agreed to. They presented a plan last week that I didn't like the way the point of sale was set up. And I said, yeah, we're gonna have lines back in our security checkpoint trying to come out. So we've, part of it's that, we've sent them back to the drawing board several times, and, initially they wanted us to pay for some of the upstairs stuff, and we kind of reminded them, hey, we've talked about this several times, we want to do that. So, I mean, it's part of the negotiation. We feel we've met a reasonable compromise on the pre-security stuff. We still need to work through the layout and the equipment they need on the post-security side. One thing, we've expressed interest in, as staff, is having a grill back there, so we could do burgers and that type of thing. It is a very big investment, $75,000, and so we know that's kind of out there. They feel like they could get by without the grill, but we're still working on whether or not that makes sense. It's cheaper if we vented out the back of the building, which that beautiful curve we've got back there. So, I mean, we're still very much in the negotiation stage on the post-security stuff.
Gotcha.
But would they come back with a request for a financial commitment and an additional extension?
They might, yeah, and, they might. We've expressed to them a preference for contract years over, financial commitment. Because it is hard for us to carve money out of the budget to put to put into these things when we're also trying to do improvements to the building itself. We've got bathrooms that are getting older now that we need to, get into, and, if we carve off dollars for that, for this, it takes away from our ability to do the other.
I guess I just, I'm trying to balance, I mean, they're gonna ask for money now and a contract extension. Are we going to be 2 months from now revisiting another contract extension?
I think we might, yeah, I think that's likely. Of course, we can say no, I think, we want to see those areas all the areas renovated. I mean, it was time. That was one of the major factors in picking Oak Wells, is we knew we needed renovation, but, it's I think easier and better to have the operator suggest what renovations make sense for their operation than to have us guess and have done those renovations ourselves and hope they can move in. We found that even with Air Host on the last remodel, is if you're thinking of the instance that we were doing that project, that we were kind of pushing the project was one thing, but they had not operated post-security at our airport, and once we got moved into that, they realized, it would have been better to have done this, that, and the other thing. And so I think, this model of getting them in here, getting them operating, figuring out, what time of day they're too busy back there and how they fix it, I think that's a better model than us trying to make the changes up front before the contract starts and then, move on that way. And I think it was especially true with the upstairs stuff. I think between us and Oak Wells, neither one of us had an idea of what that would cost and what they felt they needed to be marketable. Because, amongst my staff, we know zero about banquet business, and I think you'll see what they've done up there. It's, like I said, frankly, I didn't know that we would ever get those renovations done or anyone would ever invest in them. And, they've really made those rooms, look incredible. I mean, I'd say just as good as they did 20 years ago when we moved into that, or 20 years ago, but 15 years ago when we moved into that space. They've done that level of renovation.
That's awesome. And we could certainly, when the next one comes about, pitch in dollars as appropriate, but stick with the 20-year contract instead of moving it further. Plus, we've got the long-range plan on what we want to do for rehabilitation and modernization of the whole airport itself. And if it doesn't fit our current budget where we're looking at this year, we could, if Oakwell starts discussing it, we can look at putting it in the next fiscal budget. So they can hold off and wait to do those until we can have the money allocated to pay for it in the next fiscal, which starts on the 1st of July, so.
I think overall, I think everybody agrees that the product is much better and that they're doing the right things. I get a lot of good feedback about what they're doing. It's interesting, we had a tenant meeting last week, and the tenants, one tenant remarked, wow, it's just too expensive for me to eat lunch there anymore. And then another tenant in the exact same position in their organization says, yeah, but it's totally worth it, the food's much better. And then there was a lot of head nodding around the room. And we knew this would kind of come. The food is more expensive, but it's a higher quality, and that's really the decision that was made by the selection panel, that we wanted to reinvest in facilities, reinvest in better food. Yes, it's going to cost a little more, but we felt like the quality improvement was worth it, and I think we're kind of seeing that in what's being suggested here is, hey, we'll invest $300,000. We ask you to partner with by giving us 5 more years of the contract.
I could concerned about being through every week that the post-security side restaurant is full every morning. There's always people, and everybody appreciates it. I mean, you've seen it out there as well, so it's a lot busier than it used to be.
Yeah, we've seen about a 20% increase in average spend per customer over there. And so they're up to about $6.50 now per boarding, $6.50 in spend per boarding, which is about the industry average. And we were always well below that. And I kept asking the last vendor, hey, what's going on? Why can't we get that number up? And we never could. I mean, we doubled our revenue when we moved into the post-security world over there because we used to have all pre-security concessions. So we went from $60,000 a year up to $100,000 a year. And what we're seeing from Oakwell's is they're able to increase that another 20%. And so, that's the quality improvement now. And so I think it's a good trade-off, all the things we're seeing. And I think, if you look at Air Host had 35 years, we're kind of saying the same thing that, we're at 20 years now. In order to have brand new facilities, it's real similar.
What do they get for $6.50?
It's a mix.
Well, they know how many boardings there are.
Yeah.
Just take total
A
revenue.
cup of coffee and something to eat, or a couple pops for the road. Some people buy the snacks, put in their bag, because the pricing is still cheaper than most of the hubs.
And I think the expectation on the other side of the class, the realization is you go any airport and you're
Yeah.
gonna be doling out the cash. And I think on this side of the glass, it's like, what can I get lunch for, Denny's for, what can I get lunch down?
Exactly.
So you're dealing with two different thought processes.
So John, would it be accurate to characterize it though, that they're likely to come back one more time for this other expenditure? It's not that they can come back every couple months and say, now we want to do this, now we want to do that.
Right.
I guess
Yeah.
that's the part that feels a little hard to manage.
No, my expectation is they're coming back one more time to kind of settle on what's on the post-security side, and that'll be the end of it. The furniture there is fairly new, and we bought it during the last remodel. It's just mainly, do we want to do a grill? How do we change the point of sale? Do we put in a temporary bar and coffee spot somewhere?
Yeah.
Kind of break lines in the morning, that type of thing, how we solve those issues. And those were all, if you sat on that selection panel, remember, those are things we asked them. We said, how are you going to do these things? Because these are the problems we have. I mean, the most frustrating problem I used to see was the line would back up 5 or 6 people deep, and then people would walk up the line and walk away. And, that's where there's revenue to be had right there, and it's terrible customer service. And so, that was a question we asked all the vendors, is how are you gonna fix that? And what they did is they doubled up their point of sale at the front, so they have double point of sale. They also have the app that you can do online, but I think we still need some other mobile way to take orders back there, either somebody with a tablet that comes out and goes through the line and starts taking orders, or we give the passenger a tablet at a kiosk and let them do that, put point and click type stuff, some other way to make sure we're breaking those lines. All airports suffer the same thing. It's a real hassle to work in an airport, especially on that side. When you think about you gotta drive up here, contend with the crowds and the parking, and you gotta go through security, which takes time. Every time you're back and forth in and out of that secure area, it's taking time to go through the screening. So airports have a hard time with staffing, and we're no exception. And so, it's part of the food costs you see at airports is literally the price of what it takes to get an employee up here is much higher than the places. Plus, the shift work. I mean, at a McDonald's, there's a lunch rush and even a dinner rush. Here, your rush is at 5:30 in the morning, with David up here trying to get his coffee before his meeting.
Because they won't let you bring it through security, right?
Right. And so, it's really a kind of a difficult work environment. You have that really, really early morning push, and then nothing going on until lunch.
And the fact that not only 1, but 2, but sometimes 3 departures crammed within an hour time frame. So if you figure you got at least 2 50-seaters and then a ERJ with 78 to a Airbus with 125 seats, you got 300 people out there that want coffee at the same time.
Right, and thus the line and the ways to break the line early and keep people fed.
Good questions. Okay, any other questions, discussion? All right, do I have a motion for approving a 15,000, or spending 15,000 for the purchase of tables and chairs for the landside seating area, and extending the Oak Wells contract for 5 years? A motion?
I'll make the motion.
Any further discussion? Obviously, nobody was excited about the motion, so maybe we need further
Wait for
discussion.
someone.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second
I just
for the
have
Oak Wells
one
proposal.
question.
Sure, no problem.
Do you anticipate when they might come back for another financial commitment or extension of the contract?
I don't,
60 days,
you know,
90
we've been
days?
working probably closer to 2 months. And it took us quite a while to work through this. You know, and so, and unfortunately, well, you know, fortunately, I guess, I mean, in good faith, they've went ahead and done it because they felt it was that important to their wedding business to get it done. Thus, the big open house this weekend, they're anxious to show that off because they really feel like that's supplementary revenue that they can be making. And so I think more on the other side, there'll be more involvement from us even where they say, you know, we'd like to do this, and we might say, no, we don't want to do that. Because we, you know, like we said last week, the counter cut that they put in there, I'm like, that's gonna back people into the security line, I don't want that. And so, I think it may still take us 60 days or so to work through the particulars of that. It might even be 3 months, to get, you know, something we're all happy with. And then the grill discussion too, I mean, whether or not we want the grill, you know, how much that's gonna cost to do, you know, what the, you know, the benefit of that would be. I think long-term, it's the right thing to do, but we're kind of space constrained back there. You know, I don't think anybody was on the board when we did that project, but, you know, we did everything we did back there for $7 million. I mean, it was a very inexpensive project, and one of the sacrifices we made, because it was the tail end of the recession, people were still feeling like, you know, maybe it was excessive, was we cut about 15 feet out of the hallway back there, so that round design was actually supposed to be 15 feet further out into the airfield, which would have allowed for bigger mechanical areas and for the kitchen, and would have allowed for more equipment in there. But you know, that would have cost another $2 million to build more overhang, and so we decided not to do it, which I mean was a prudent choice at the time. You know, but you know now we're a little space constrained with what they can do back there. So they've got to spend some time in that kitchen relaying it out to figure out how the equipment fits. You know, we've tried to get them interested in a dumbwaiter down in the basement where we have all kinds of room, but of course that has its limitations too.
Rich, are you thinking maybe to hold up on the contract?
I
Extension
just
until
wonder
the
if it doesn't
final-
make sense, I mean, to award the 15,000 for the materials, the tables and chairs, but I don't know how you can give them a warm, fuzzy feeling that, yeah, we are going to extend it, we're willing to extend it, but I would rather do it once than do it twice.
Well, and
Well, I guess, go ahead, Bo.
yeah, I was, with the commitment that they've made on all the expenditures upstairs so far.
True, yes,
I
exactly.
think we're at that point right now where we're thinking of giving them that warm fuzzy that, hey, we appreciate all the money you spent. We'll give you a little more money to finish off the basement or the outside security area with the 5-year contract. But then if they come back for another amount of money to do the post-security information, we'll have that same discussion on to 25 years, 30 years. That may be too far out to give them more contract, but certainly still penny up what is appropriate to share the cost on them. But they've done a huge amount so far.
And by way of precedent, we've done that with the other tenants. Holman, as they've invested in the ramp over there, we've extended several times with AdMax. We did that right down in equity a few years ago where we said, okay, if you guys fix the fire system, we'll take years off your acquisition time for the buildings. And so that's what we've kind of done in the past, is interject capital for dollars to try and improve our tenant situations.
I'm not concerned about that, and I think that they make that investment, they're entitled to an extension. To me, if they're gonna do it in 30 days, or we're gonna extend it again in 60 days,
So I think the question you're asking is, are we in short-term negotiations with them for post-security remodeling now? Or are they
Yeah,
still
I mean,
thinking?
it's ongoing. Just this piece, we've been in negotiations for, I mean, at least 6 months, to try and get this to the table. What is your budget? What are you spending? What are you proposing? So I mean, it does take some time for us to work through these things with them, and, I think the land side, stuff in the meeting rooms, we have less input as to how to do it. On the other side, we're gonna have more input, because we know how that operation works. So I think it'll probably take a little bit longer to get something that we all think is good out of it. Because, I mean, we really wanna see, a way to break lines and a way to make sure we're serving the customer quickly and using technology and those types of things. And, we're just not even close to there yet with them.
Yeah, I could certainly see a self-serve kiosk or even another standalone kiosk on the right side where you got the gates 2 or 3, 4, and 5, just so that you can split and not have all people standing at the same time.
And there's a couple other operational things we need to fix too, like, this whole thing has been, on the run really, but the other thing we want to get fixed is some convenient way to bring food out when this restaurant's closed. So because there isn't a lot of revenue in the afternoon, this restaurant routinely closes at 1 in the wintertime because we don't have any flights. And so we've said throughout what we want is the ability for them to take orders over there, maybe a menu board somewhere in the pre-security side where you can either call them or something, or a tablet there where you can dial up something you want, and then they would bring it out of security to you. And we want to fix that too, some way of doing that. And the biggest limiter there is that person, if it is a person that brings it out, then has to go back to the checkpoint. So their circuit time is like 15 minutes, which if we had some type of dumb waiter you could improve on, but that's not an easy thing to do either. And so, we still have to work through that. So, I mean, it could take us some time to kind of figure all that out. But we do want the ability for people out here to be able to use that concession even if they're not in security. And there are some airports now that are letting on ticketed passengers through security again. So that's yet another can of worms over the next year that could be available to us to open as these couple of pilot projects are giving feedback now. Maybe that's our solution is if you don't have a ticket, then you can still go through, you just go through the checkpoint. I see some no.
It's true.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
No, really good. And I think, Rich, to help with yours is we can certainly set the timeline with funding as well. That, if they come to us in 30 days, say, hey, we want to spend another $100,000, we want you, we'll go, we'd love to do that, but it's not in the budget. You continue planning, but this isn't gonna happen until we go through the hoops to make it happen the next fiscal year. Sound reasonable? Any more on that? All right, I think we have a motion. Do we have a second? And a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the Oakwell's proposal as previously discussed, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. 2, capital project, phase 2 road construction.
Yes, as I mentioned a little earlier, we are expecting grants as early as March or April, and so it's that time of year where we need to move projects ahead for construction. This is a $1.7 million project. 90% of that would be our normal airport improvement grant from the FAA, and the rest of it would come from our local funds, ultimately funded through the airline rates. And what we'll be doing is renovating the roads all the way from the terminal out here all the way back to FedEx. We'll also pick up the Front Range Road down through there to the new hangar development, and then across to the into that new hangar development, so that we're tying that into the Front Range Road. And we'll also be replacing the pavement out here in the loading dock area, which is pretty chewed up also. And so it's a basic mill and fill. There isn't a whole lot of other engineering in there that we have to do, fortunately. We are going to replace some lights. We've got some of the old shoebox style lights from basically the terminal intersection all the way down and into the Holman development down there that we'll be replacing with the LEDs that we've been using in the last few years. Those have been, I think, a terrific maintenance reducer for us, and also a lot more efficient on power, so we're anxious to see those go up. This is our major capital improvement for the year. The road renovation, we'd ask the board to approve not to exceed $1.7 million for those landside improvements.
Do you have the map? Can we just take a look? Where does the project start going east from here? Is it right at the Bear and the Buffalo?
So we stopped the paving kind of right there during the last project. So this will actually come in here and straighten out these lanes a little bit. So we'll basically be adding a lane, so that you can continue forward and turn left out of there. So there'll be more lane width in through here, and then that'll go all the way around back to FedEx. Let's see. Nope, that's no good.
Next one over.
Yep, we're gonna have to go all the way to the oldie. So yeah, we'll pick it up here, we'll go all the way around this long corner to FedEx, back in through here, and then back to this gate. In addition, we'll be down here at Front Range paving this strip of road in through there, which I think all of that pavement's in excess of 20 years old, would be my guess. Not much maintenance been done. The good news is the subsurface conditions look really good. We don't have a whole lot of shifting ground or anything like that.
Did you say those roads are gonna be widened too? Like
Just,
that?
yeah, so right near the terminal there, in this area here, you've got this kind of pocket pullout. And so what we can do is kind of jog that road over a little bit, so that this road, you'll be able to go straight and also turn left. So it'll just take away that potential, because what you see is people kind of come up to that corner and screeching on to go left, and then the FedEx trucks and stuff that are trying to come back are right behind them. And so both lanes go left right now, and so then the guy that's going straight has to slow down with that left. And in the future configuration, you'll kind of veer to the left, and this road will also allow you to pop out to the right and go around that traffic. Down in this intersection, let's see if I've got a better, boy, I don't have a good map for that FedEx intersection either, do I? You over there, Rob?
No.
How about that one? Nope. But the other thing we'll be fixing is, it's hard to see from where you're sitting, but in this intersection here, we've got kind of an early stage roundabout where the road kind of comes into an odd piece of pavement, and there's this massive island of pavement in there, where it's not real clear what to do, and then the yields are odd too. The traffic flowing into Admax Holman can continue to go, and the yield is actually on the FedEx traffic coming out. And so you end up with traffic that would normally think it should be going and clipping along through that intersection. It's supposed to yield to the people turning into the left. And so we need to kind of work on that roundabout concept there and straighten that out, something to look more like a standard T, and then stop the traffic that's trying to go into that Admax and Holman intersection to give right away to the straight traffic.
We are not doing a roundabout though.
No, it's more of a standard T.
And part of that, well, two questions. Are we gonna widen it out to a second lane at that T so that the folks continuing on to the FedEx, because I can see, and Dwight probably knows more than I do, that 7 o'clock Avmax showtime, that everybody's turning left to go home at Avmax, and if you're the one guy that wants to go straight, you're gonna be stuck in that. Is there?
That was one of the things we talked about on Friday.
That was a comment at 50% to add a little
Left.
dedicated left turn into Holman Avmax while the predominant traffic can continue on towards FedEx.
So we'll have a little left bay in there too, given that is on a corner, so we don't get a lot of queuing, because it's kind of on that curve, but we'll have some left bay there, we can store a couple vehicles to turn left.
What about the traffic coming back from FedEx? It's like a dangerous intersection.
Well, and so that's what we want to do, is make that more of a standard intersection, so the Holman traffic will get a stop sign coming out. So the people today, those folks kind of free flow out, and of course, if you're coming back from FedEx, and that's where the customer drop off is too. Most of the truck drivers know, the customers may not, and so they're not expecting to stop or have someone come out in front of them, but they need to. And the left, by default, the left is also given priority, because the right-of-way is into the left. And so we're gonna have to change those right-of-ways. We talked about temporary signage too during construction and after to say, hey, intersection change, be aware that this is changing. So yeah, it'll change to more what you would think of with the straight traffic having right-of-way and the left traffic having to stop. And then coming back from FedEx, you'll have the right-of-way in that intersection to go straight.
Because the last time I almost got T-boned on that intersection, and I was from a FedEx truck. So even though they're supposed to know they're yielding, they don't know.
Homeland Security.
That was,
We actually had she's not kidding. We actually had a rollover accident there one time. I was shocked.
is there any way to change, is there any way or any thought of changing the grade so that as you make that descending turn down to the left and then the climbing back up, that can be more of a level, because especially when it's icy, we've all been there where you're coming down to the right and then you start that turn and everything slides right over to the cliff area if you're not paying attention.
Are you talking prior to that Holman intersection?
Right before right on the west side, when you make down the hill to the right before you come back up to the left. Are you guys gonna change the grade, or is it gonna?
We are not changing the grade in
We're
that
not
location
changing
there.
the grade.
The speeds right now are posted slow enough where if folks are following the posted speed limit, they shouldn't have any issues, but if they are exceeding it, then it is kind of a safety concern, which is why the airport is also making the investment to
Guardrail.
put in guardrail
Oh,
and
okay.
remove the existing steel cable that's maybe about 8 inches off the ground with actual metal W shape that you're more prone to see on the interstate.
I feel like we should have enough insurance proceeds to do that.
And then last question is, are we going to close it to one lane during the construction so that people can still get in and out of Amex?
Yeah, we.
Do one side at a time?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the plan. We may work with FedEx some to see if there's a day where we could, I mean, I'd love to not have cold joints in there if we could figure out a way to do that double paver lane. So we may work with FedEx to see if there's any possibility we could do the fill all one night after you get past, like Homeland Security. But that's something we would have to coordinate with the contractor too. I mean, if they could pave a double lane, 2 pavers, but it's not economic probably to get 2 pavers on the job, so. The one failure you do see, which is typical, I mean, down the cold joint on that road, you do see a longitudinal crack right down the middle from that cold joint, which is, it's common, and we got 20 years of life. I mean, there's nothing unusual about the wear we have out there. It's just, if I could somehow have a hot joint there, I'd be more happy.
And there are no other ways off the hill from FedEx during construction?
There is not,
You gotta come that road or not at all?
unless you're walking.
Or horseback.
There's a horse there, yeah.
Okay. Questions? All right. Do we have a motion to approve the landside improvement north of terminal to FedEx building contract not to exceed 1.7 million for the design and, is it design and construction? Right?
No, this is only the construction portion. The board approved design of this project last fall.
So not necessarily for the design, but for the construction of the landside improvement project as stated.
I would make the motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? And I guess I was supposed to ask for any more discussion before the second, but thank you. Any further discussion? All right, with a motion and a second, I call for a vote on the previously discussed items. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Let's get a new road. Okay, on to terminal refresh dining area light fixture budget revision.
Unfortunately, the dining area fixture, not as good news as the road. As we did some investigating over the last 2 months, we had initially met with one of the architects that had worked on the remodel, the last remodel, and they had indicated we had some precast concrete up above that area that would serve well to tie into with some mounts. And a few weeks later, we got up there in a lift and found that we have drywall suspended on a track system. And then above that track system is a gap about 53 inches all the way up to the corrugated roof. And so it's a much more difficult structure to put much load on because there isn't a lot of girth there to hold weight. Not that these lighting fixtures are all that heavy. But Rod did meet with a structural engineer last week to take a look at that system. He thinks we can anchor into the metal, but we'll need a couple of extra anchor points. Instead of having just 2 anchor points on a 20-foot span, we're gonna need 4 anchor points on that same span. And so in the process of investigating that, we have a little bit more money into the structural engineer to look at it, and then we also are gonna need a little bit more money to design the system to mount. The project originally was budgeted about $40,000 during the terminal renovation back in 14. At the time, we just simply didn't get the project done at the time. We're trying to get the terminal open and everything. We didn't quite get that far. But now we're trying to get that lighting fixture up. That area, as we were looking at a little earlier today before the meeting, Tends to be a little darker than the other parts of the terminal. It's designed to have some flow lighting from these lights on these windows on the front, but because that same lighting blinds the ticket counter, most of those blinds are closed, and so we don't get that flow through lighting most of the times in the daylight. And we'd like to have something that accentuates the space and makes it a little more, kind of breaks up that wave pattern in the roof too, to make the terminal a little more interesting. And so we'd recommend increasing the budget from $10,000 that was approved in October to $15,000 to accommodate the additional structure work and the mounting work to get the lighting fixture in. We do have a vendor, and we're fairly confident with this budget we can get the lighting fixture in.
So we're talking about just using support from the joists that are supporting the corrugated roof?
Not even joists that we can find. It's deck,
Okay.
metal deck, you know.
So it has a pan decking for the roof itself way up there, and we'd be anchoring into that decking, that metal decking. And right now, well, you got your roof, and then 50-some inches below that is kind of it's a gypsum board or sheetrock ceiling, but it's suspended from that same metal. And then those waves are suspended from the track system that's suspending the gypsum board or the sheetrock, so.
It's a really light construction, there's no way we can pay any more off.
And we're afraid of just adding more weight to where those waves are anchored. That's why we had the structural guy come up and,
So we're gonna wire it from up above that.
yeah, so we'll have to come up and then go through that sheetrock and then,
So, but we already have the light, everything is paid for except for the additional.
No, we haven't paid for the light yet.
No.
We have
don't-
we have a
we need the
vendor
whole
for it, we got
project.
3 bids, and so we have a vendor for it. We just don't have we didn't have the mounting system, and realizing that it was gonna cost more than 10, kind of held everything off until we could come back to the board in January.
And most important question, is it gonna match the new furniture that we're putting?
Absolutely. It's gonna be a spectacular space. The lighting fixture we're looking at is kind of a beam, if you can imagine that, kind of as a wood beam. And then the Edison bulbs hung off of long units at different elevations. So if you've been down to, what's the bar downtown? Inbar.
Inbar?
Oh, they have, the Edison bulbs. The Inbar has, the kind of like we're talking about, it's basically, it looks like it's a hollow beam, and then the lights dangle down from that at different elevations, and those will be 3 deep, so you'll have a field of Edison bulbs, different Edison bulbs throughout that entire space, kind of providing, very low wattage, 40 watts apiece, but providing a nice ambient light over that eating
Yeah,
area.
that would be cool.
And in talking to Oakwells, their hope in the future is to use that space more as a kind of a cocktail bar for some of their events. And their idea is they'll have some smaller standing tables that they'll bring out in that area during some of their bigger events as kind of a greeting space for some of those things too. So we think all of that added together really increases the appeal of that area. Even when you're just in the terminal building, kind of taking that dark space and adding some light to it, I think it's gonna be really nice. And we've kind of tested the look of it, because again, we don't want something that's gonna block the views of the terminal from those balconies on the 3rd floor. But these whips are light enough that you'll be able to see through that field and see the rest of the terminal too. It's one of the nice things about having a wedding or even the proms, when they have it up here is, those balconies are used by people to, kind of greet people coming in and that type of thing, so we don't want to mess up those aesthetics either.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve increasing the expenditures for the dining area lighting fixture up to but not to exceed $15,000? Any further discussion?
As I stated early, my son-in-law was the engineer who came up and looked at it, so I would just recuse myself from that.
Thank you, sir. Copy that. Maria? And I have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor of extending the dining room area lighting fixture expense up to and not exceed $15,000, say aye. Opposed, nay? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, that is all of our primary. Are there any?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I ask for a point of clarification on the preceding item? The 1.7 million?
Oh, sure.
I think the way you read the motion and we voted was right, but this says staff recommends approving funds not to exceed 1.7 million for the design.
Right.
That's not right.
It's
I
right?
clarified that.
I thought you did,
Yeah.
I
okay.
messed that up.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, for other reader or someone might have that question.
Yeah, we need to note that in the next
Yeah.
one's minutes.
Thank you, because I thought when we voted, I was reading it as
Yeah, I
you were
know.
saying it, and I'm like, oh, wait
That's
a
not what he
minute.
said.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
okay,
It
thank
was
you.
clear it was for the construction.
Yeah.
Construction.
Right.
Excellent question. Okay, are there any agenda items that present, I already said that, disregard. Let's see, any other items not on the agenda that anyone would like to bring up at this time? Outstanding. Final Airport Board Authority comments. Commissioner Gibbs. Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Aritz. Commissioner Timber. Commissioner Evans. I have no further comments. Any additional public comments? With no additional comments, no further business in front of the board, I declare this meeting adjourned. Let's take a quick 7-minute. We'll be back here straight up on the hour at 3 o'clock, and we'll see if we can get through the work session. Thank you.
6:15.
I know, I'm like, well. Did you guys do that to mess with me, because I complained about it being on daylight savings time?
I don't know what happened, the battery.
For the city,
Maybe we better put
Yeah,
a
we get to
clock
do that.
on
This
the
was
next
the
agenda.
cover.
Yeah.
twice,
Yeah.
for the city and the airport.
I second that.
Yeah, I got it right here. I just haven't turned it
I don't know, they gotta do them, they said they do them for all their city.
up to the rest.
You can guide you on this one.
What?
Yeah.
You can guide this and this one.
Oh, okay. Well, I think he's done it before. Yeah, he would have done it last year. or-
Oh, when you were done?
No, I wasn't the chair.
Oh, yeah,
Sean was the
yeah,
chair.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Or he can call me. Okay. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, he's done it, I think, in Sean.
Rod, when are we gonna get our parking
But I'll-
passes
Yeah.
When you gonna get what?
I'm just gonna run to the
Parking
restroom, I can ask him. Yeah,
for this year?
yep.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe you're not getting them.
You know we are.
Did yours expire?
Well, it's only good for 2019 and 2020.
Barely.
Yeah, we'll have to see on the.
It's time you have your,
It says 3/31/20, the expiration,
So when is it?
in the blue, yeah. So I think we're good until then,
Oh,
underneath,
Yeah.
underneath there, it's got.
mine says, 131, what's yours?
Didn't I say 3?
Yeah, 131.
Well, I can't read, I guess I got it.
We can get out, we got 2 days to get out. Let's sucker.